Hello, everybody. I hope you had a good weekend. Just catching you up on what we discussed yesterday in shul. So my topic was Hillbilly Ethics, which is sort of a riff on the book by J.D. Vance, Hillbilly Elegy. And what I started talking about the book by David Hackett Fisher, Albion Seed, the Four Strains of Migration to America from England. Fisher talks about the fact that there were four distinct migrations from England to the American colonies, and that each came from their own place and had their own culture background based on the geographic and social and economic conditions of the place from which that migration emanated. So the first migration was from East Anglia, which is northeast of London, to Massachusetts, and that was really the Puritan migration, which kind of leads into the American mythology that we're all very familiar with. The second was a little bit later, came from the south of England, came to Virginia, and that consisted much more of a small segment of the population that was a landed aristocracy who saw society as built around a manor with a lord of the manor and servants who served the lord. The third was the Quaker migration, sort of from the Upper Midlands near Birmingham, Leeds, uh, the heartland of English Quakerism, and they came to the Delaware River Valley, led, of course, by William Penn, who founded Pennsylvania and founded Philadelphia, and the Quaker ethic permeated the Delaware River Valley on both the Pennsylvania and the New Jersey sides. The fourth migration was Scots-Irish and came from the northern border of England and the border with Scotland. Um, Fisher posits that this area, the English-Scottish borderland, had been the subject of pervasive warfare for hundreds and hundreds of years, leading in part to the migration to Northern Ireland, which brought the Protestant population into Northern Ireland, but also this was where the Scots-Irish came to America. Because they were the last of the migrants by the time they got to the colonies. The cities along the coast were all heavily populated. Also, this group was relatively poor, and as we'll see, not as highly cultured as the population of the coastline. So this population was pushed westward into the backcountry, and they populated Appalachia all the way from Pennsylvania down into Arkansas. And because of that, there's sort of a common Appalachian culture that holds over that entire Appalachian population. Fisher analyzes these populations in great detail. He explores 24 different features that characterize populations, from language, speech, dress, architecture, attitudes towards power, sex, marriage, death, magic, religion. Really a very, very comprehensive study. The reason that it became kind of gained more prominence over the past several years is because he's fairly critical of the fourth migrants. He characterizes them as having very poor attitudes towards education, family structure, premarital sex, substance abuse. That was all derives from the fact that their culture grew in a context where there was very little stability. There was very little incentive for long-term thinking or planning because of the fact that the English and the Scottish would kind of invade each other and burn down all the buildings and take prisoners and burn the crops and so forth for every hundreds of years. So it became a culture that was emphasized power, emphasized violence, emphasized the role of men over women, and really devalued rules, marriage, structure. In his book, Hillbilly Elegy, Vance looks at the environment in which he was raised in the Ohio portion of Appalachia and talks about the substance use and violence that pervaded his own family. And he is grateful for the fact that he was given an opportunity to transcend that. He joined the army. Going to the army allowed him to get an education. Getting an education allowed him to get a good job, which allowed him to take time off to write a good book, which allowed him to rise to prominence and become vice president of the United States. So there you go. The reason that I'm raising this in the context of our own topic, which is really an introduction to the study of the biblical concept of the chosen people, is to give thought to the idea of how culture kind of defines a particular population and how it sets forth their values. And what I'd like to suggest, and we can give more thought to over the course of the coming weeks as to whose thought this may reflect, is the idea that this concept of the chosen people may actually be just gratitude for the fact that Judaism has a culture that has persisted and pervaded and sustained us as a population over such an extended period of time. It allowed us to maintain a sense of dignity and a sense of pride and a sense of stability in terms of tradition and culture, family life, values for education, certainly long-term planning, and the idea that we have gratitude to our forefathers and owe a debt to our descendants. And to think about the role that this plays in thinking of ourselves as a chosen nation, and as that is reflected in biblical thought. So this is a thought that will be discussed in greater detail over the coming weeks. I hope you're able to join me. Everybody have a great week.